Our husband and wife team of pop culture fanatics are exploring all things from music and movies to television and fandom. We'll look at the interesting and obscure entertainment news of the week. We'll talk about theme park and pop culture news. We'll give you the latest and greatest on pop culture conventions. We'll give you a deep dive into Disney, Star Wars, and much more. Check out our video episodes at youtube.com/insightsintothings. Our audio episodes at podcast.insightsintoentertainment.com, or check us out on the web at insightsintothings.com.
No credits rolled.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 8 of No Credits Rolled. My name is Sam Whalen, and today we're going to be talking about some depressing gaming news, unfortunately, as well as my thoughts on Fallout 76 and Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. I'm sure you've all been eagerly anticipating my Suicide Squad review. Before we get started, I just want to remind everyone that the fine folks over at Philly Drinkers have partnered with the show to provide you awesome Philly sports merch for all your favorite teams. Unfortunately, the Sixers have bounced, but the Phillies are red hot right now, so make sure to check out Philly Drinkers for all your Philadelphia sports merch needs. Use the link in the description to get a discount, and every purchase helps out the show. There's also one other thing I wanted to touch on before we get into the news. We, of course, have a call-in line here, and someone was actually nice enough to call in this time. See if you recognize the voice.
Slam! Hello! Sean here. I'm the actor behind Scratch in Baldur's Gate 3. I hope you're keeping well, friend. A little birdie told me that you are starting your own podcast talking about video games and Baldur's Gate 3, no less, which I think is absolutely awesome, and I can't wait to listen in. So I thought, what better way to start things off for you than by giving you some Scratch facts from Baldur's Gate 3. Are you ready? Let's go. 1. Having Scratch in your party is useful for many different things. Not only can he find items without the need for a survival check, but he can also give you an additional perception check. He can revive fallen enemies with his lick, and also he can break concentration saving throws. Cool, right? The best boy of many tricks and talents. 2. If you have Speak with Animals, our favourite spell and feature, am I right? And you have Scratch in your party running around Faerun, when he barks to let you know that he's found something, that is actually me doing the barking. So the barking with Speak with Animals is different to without. 3. Baldur's Gate had approximately 17,000 strands of ending, which is crazy. So just imagine how many versions of the lines we had to record as well. So with Scratch, I mean, there was if you found the owlbear, if you didn't have the owlbear. There's obviously all the different gender options as well, male, female, non-binary. There's if you're in favour, if you're not in favour with Scratch. Yes, I know there's a kind of approval thing as well. So the options are multiple. Just imagine how complicated the epilogue was to write. What I love about the video game world or industry is the community. I've honestly never met as passionate and dedicated and close-knit a community as that of Baldur's Gate 3. I really do think that the people are what make games special. The players, obviously. So I think running a podcast on video games, it's a fundamental part of the community. So, you know, what better way than to celebrate the worlds we love, right? So, Slam, from me, Sean, and from Scratch, the best boy in all of Faerun, we wish you all the very best in the podcasts and games and adventures that you're going to cover. We have no doubt that it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, that's right, folks. That is, in fact, Sean Mendham, the voice of Scratch the dog from Baldur's Gate 3, one of my favorite characters. And I'm sure if you've met Scratch in Baldur's Gate 3, he's one of your favorite characters as well. My friend Joe, who we had on the show before a couple episodes ago to talk about Helldivers and Baldur's Gate, Joe was nice enough to get me a cameo for the show. So thanks to Joe and thanks to Sean as well. You know, there's a lot of people that go into making a game, and it's always nice to hear from some of the talent too. But of course, you can always call in. I just got to plug the phone line while I can. You can always call in at 856-209-0713. Of course, that's 856-209-0713. And I'd like to hear from you too. All right, enough dilly-dallying. Let's get into the show. So yes, I did tease it at the beginning. We do have some depressing news today to cover, and that is, of course, the Xbox layoffs. It always sucks to talk about layoffs, but Xbox recently announced it was closing a handful of studios. This included Arcane Austin. They created Redfall, but also the Dishonored series, Prey, and Deathloop. Microsoft also announced the closure of Tango Gameworks. They created Hi-Fi Rush, which was widely seen as a success for Xbox at the time, especially at a time when the brand was really struggling. You know, Hi-Fi Rush kind of shadow dropped, came out of nowhere, and people loved it. And, you know, I've only played maybe an hour or two of it. I really do want to complete it. And it's something I would talk about on this show if I did play it. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. But I know that it was very widely accepted, as a great game. Also, Alpha Dog Games is being closed. They're a mobile game developer. They made a game called Wraithborn in 2012 and the recent game Mighty Doom, which is a Doom mobile game. I actually did check that out. Played that a little bit. It's a Doom mobile game, but of course you hate to see anyone get laid off, no matter what kind of stuff they're working on. Of course, all three of these studios are affiliated with Bethesda Studios. Microsoft acquired ZeniMax Media, which is Bethesda's parent company, for $7.5 billion back in 2021. And it was a big deal at the time. I think I talked about it on Insights into Things. I believe we did one for the Activision Blizzard thing. But either way, that Bethesda acquisition was one of those things, those dominoes we talk about when we talk about Microsoft, setting up the dominoes, waiting for this big payoff. And this is kind of the opposite of that, where you acquire a studio and now you're doing these big layoffs. And in some cases, when these studios are producing games that are critically successful and you're shuttering them, how does that make you look? Not super great. You know, when people think Bethesda, they think Elder Scrolls 6. They think maybe a new Fallout game with the success of the Fallout show. But there's other things that Bethesda does. You know, those Dishonored games, people were really hoping to get a third one of those. It doesn't look like that's going to happen now. Prey, people love that Prey game. I enjoyed it. Now, again, didn't finish it. No credits rolled. What do you expect? But Arcane Austin was really known for these like open world, what am I trying to think of here? Like the intricate first person games. I mean, Deathloop, everybody loved that game. I wasn't a big fan of it. People love Deathloop. I think it won all kinds of awards when it came out. I might have won Game of the Year. I should probably fact check that. Of course, they had Redfall, right, which was not well received critically or financially. But they were working on it, right? There was a Redfall update that was supposed to come out. There was DLC that was still being worked on at the time of this closure. So who knows what's going to happen with that? And, you know, if that game's even going to be given a chance at a second chance, if that makes any sense. So at the time of this recording, this is all pretty fresh in the news cycle, right? There's a lot of strong emotions. A lot is still unknown. A lot is still to come. There are rumors that there's going to be more cuts. I don't want to get too deep into the weeds this week because I don't want to speak out of turn or, you know, sort of shoot from the hip. But I feel like I couldn't, if we're going to talk about the news, we have to talk about this, right? I'm not a news outlet, but I do have some sort of obligation to cover these big stories. And this is definitely a big story this week. Like I said, more cuts are rumored to be coming, but we're going to have to wait and see what happens there. You hate to see it no matter what. It's tough to see. Layoffs suck, right? Everybody knows it. I don't think anybody would agree. Anybody would say that layoffs are a fun thing. Personally, I've seen layoffs in my industry recently. You know, everybody's favorite holiday is the end of quarter one when these cuts tend to happen. I'm seeing it now. I've got friends that were laid off, friends that were cut. It all comes down to the bottom line. You know, I know there are economic justifications for layoff. If you are in that position to be making those kind of decisions. But, you know, I don't know if I care. At the end of the day, people are buying into an industry, right? You're buying into the industry you want to pursue with the hope that they can provide for their families and themselves. And with that, hopefully comes a sense of job security. But we're seeing time and time again that there isn't job security. Whether that be in the gaming industry that has had all kinds of layoffs almost on a weekly basis, or in another industry where you think you are in a secure position and then all of a sudden cuts come around again and your name's on the list. You know, like I said, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds, and I'm only 24, so I haven't maybe accepted the way that the world seems to work. But if companies continuously put themselves in positions where layoffs are expected, where layoffs are part of the plan, maybe there's something wrong with the plan in the first place, right? Maybe we need to make a world or a system where, you know, practices of overhiring or downsizing or studio consolidations, where these things don't need to happen, where people can land the job they want and feel safe in that job and not have to worry about, you know, the hangman coming around every couple months or so and people getting fired because, you know, profits for the entire company are down or need to be up. And because those profits can always be higher, thanks to capitalism, you know, maybe we're never going to be able to satisfy that beast. I don't know. I'm definitely rambling at this point. So back on track to Xbox. What does this mean for Xbox? I asked that question a lot. We've all been waiting for Xbox to have their big moment with all these game studio acquisitions, you know, Bethesda, Activision. I saw rumors that they're thinking about putting Call of Duty on Games Pass. What are they doing, right? What is their plan going forward? If acquisitions just lead to layoffs, what is the end game? I mean, Tango Gameworks was a critical success, or had a critical success, with Hi-Fi Rush. Unfortunately, financially, the numbers were hurt with the game releasing on Games Pass, which we've talked about before, either on this show or on Insights into Things. When things come out on Games Pass, while more people are able to access it, from a financial point of view, you're typically going to lose money because I believe you are paid a sum, right? You're paid up front by Xbox to acquire this game. And then on Games Pass, you lose some of that revenue from someone just buying the game outright because they're just going to wait for it to come to Games Pass. I mean, that's how I played Hi-Fi Rush, was because Shadow dropped on Games Pass that day. But when your Xbox sets up a system where we say, hey, we're going to acquire your studio, we're going to publish your game, and we're going to publish it on Games Pass, and then we're going to can your studio when it doesn't financially perform well, but because it's on Games Pass is part of the reason why it's not financially performing well. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and it doesn't really add up. This is a quote from Aaron Greenberg, who was Xbox's marketing vice president. This is back in 2023. Back in 2023, there were rumors about Hi-Fi Rush not performing well financially, so Greenberg came out and said this. He says, quote, Hi-Fi Rush was a breakout hit for us and our players in all key measurements and expectations. We couldn't be happier with what the team at Tango Gameworks delivered with this surprise release. Well, it turns out they could be happier because they ended up, you know, closing the studio. So I don't know. I don't know if maybe that was just corporate speak at the time to kind of quell those rumors and preserve Microsoft's initiative with these studios going forward. But I mean, there's tons of clips you can find online of, you know, guys like Phil Spencer and all them going on different shows. The Kind of Funny Xcast in particular. Phil did a big thing last year after Redfall came out, a big interview, taking a lot of personal accountability for it. But there are statements in even that interview that are now coming into question because of how Xbox is treating these studios. And, you know, Phil Spencer's one guy, right? He's not like this evil maniacal overlord that is making all these decisions. There's a lot of people behind the scenes at the level higher up in the company that are making these decisions. And of course, at the end of the day, these are all human beings that make these decisions. But when it comes to the corporate side of things, I have a difficult time remembering that. So it's worth saying. So yeah, Xbox acquires studios and then, like I just said, puts their games on Games Pass, impacts sales, and then isn't happy with the sales. There seems to be some kind of logic breakdown here. This is also right after a couple months ago, Hi-Fi Rush became multi-platform, right? It was one of those Xbox games that got put out on PlayStation. This included Sea of Thieves and Grounded. I guess it was too little too late, right, in terms of profit. They didn't make enough money with this multi-platform deal. Or I think if this would have gotten done sooner, maybe you would have seen more benefit, right? If it wasn't just the Games Pass ecosystem, then maybe they would have had more sales in general for the game. But it really just seems like Xbox is just pivoting left and right with what they want to do going forward. And it's not a good look, I don't think. I don't have it in the notes here, but I do know we're waiting on the Indiana Jones game. Let me just verify that is being published by ZeniMax. Yeah, so Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, it's developed by Machine Games, who are the Wolfenstein people, but it's being published by Bethesda. So, maybe Bethesda will be able to kind of recoup from this if that Indiana Jones game comes out and is a big hit, which I suspect it will be, barring it being terrible. All of the signs are pointing that it should be a good game, but we've been disappointed in the past. We'll have to wait and see. I don't know what the plan is for Xbox now, right? I could probably do another whole episode on this. I did an episode on it before, a little more optimistically looking at Xbox plans going forward. But with the treatment of this and the shuttering of all these Bethesda studios, it's difficult to see what the plan is next. And is this the end of, not the end, but this is a big hit on Xbox's plan of acquiring these studios and making games out of them, or making games from them. It's not a good look, especially if you are a studio that Xbox is looking to acquire and you say, well, this is how you treated these Bethesda devs. How are you going to treat us? I don't know. It's not a good look, bottom line. But hey, maybe Elder Scrolls 6 will fix all of our problems when it comes out in 25 years. Anyway, moving on to story number 2 today, we've got some Helldivers drama. I'm sure you have seen this story. It's pretty tough to avoid. But speaking of companies tanking their own brand, let's talk about Sony and the recent Helldivers 2 fiasco. That's right, folks. The Xbots and the Sony ponies. No one's safe this week. I'm coming after both of you. Anyway, despite it seeming to dominate the gaming news feed, believe it or not, this story has only been going on for like a week. It started back on May the 3rd when Sony announced that Steam players would have to link a PlayStation Network account in order to play Helldivers 2. At the time, this was from a community post on Steam. Their justification was due to the, quote, technical issues the game faced and at launch that prevented this change from being mandatory, saying that the, quote, grace period was now over. The grace period for linking your account. They also said safety was a concern, saying that the priority was, quote, protecting our players and upholding the values of safety and security provided on PlayStation and PlayStation Studios games, which you can take that with a grain of salt considering the massive amount of data leaks that Sony has had in the last couple of years. But yeah, player safety was allegedly one of the concerns they cited. Now, PC gamers are one of those groups you definitely don't want to piss off, and those PC gamers on Steam without PSN accounts or who just didn't want to do this were justifiably angry with this change. It's worth keeping in mind that Helldivers 2 was Sony's largest PC launch ever. They've been doing a lot of PC ports of games like Last of Us, which I don't think worked too well because the port was bad. Spider-Man, they've mostly been dealing in ports. But Helldivers was one of the first games that was a Sony Interactive Entertainment launch. That was huge. I mean, obviously, I've talked about Helldivers on the show before. Big fan. But the PC community also latched onto this game because of, I don't know why. It's popular to play with your friends, and using the Steam ecosystem is probably even easier. And this linking, forcing people to have a PSN account attached to it, kind of came out of nowhere. Well, that's not necessarily true, because you can see when you initially were to sign up for the game that it did say that this link could become a possibility. And there's screenshots of that you can find online of it saying that. So people should have been aware of this, but I think the idea was that it took them so long without doing it that PC gamers just assumed it was never going to happen. And not to mention with the runaway success of Helldivers 2, all the technical issues it had at launch, it seemed like they were just going to let this sleeping dog lie and not have to worry about the potential backlash. Well, that wasn't the case. So after this announcement, people began review bombing the game. I have the number 14,000 negative reviews here, but I saw another source saying 20,000 reviews once it was all said and done. A bunch of negative reviews posted on Steam, tanking this game's what's the word? The review score, I guess. On Steam where it says mostly positive, overwhelmingly positive, mostly negative, whatever that score is, the user rating. So with, 14,000 to 20,000 negative reviews, it obviously tanked the game's review score, and you had people from Arrowhead, jokingly tweeting, "Ooh, right in the review, hit us right in the review score." as well as a ton of angry tweets, Discord posts, just a lot of public outrage from the Helldivers community as a whole, not just the PC gamers, but everybody. Nobody seemed to be, on board for this. For the record, I agree this was a ridiculous decision on Sony's part. It definitely reads as tone deaf. I'm poking fun at PC gamers. I just find it funny when gamers come together on anything and get all worked up. It's just the passion. I find it amusing. There are a lot of issues in the world, but I'm glad that we can rally and save Helldivers 2. I'm glad that is where we can direct our energy. It's also worth noting there are 177 countries where you simply can't make a PSN account, and Sony went ahead and delisted Helldivers 2 in those countries. That's pretty bad. 177 countries where you can no longer buy the game. Who knows how that's going to affect sales? I'll skip to the end a little bit here for that. Spoilers, as of this recording, those 177 countries still are delisted and still cannot buy the game. The countries aren't delisted. The game is delisted in those countries, and you still can't purchase the game. So that's sort of the last lingering question because, of course, if you've heard, Sony did end up reversing this decision just days later after the public outcry. So, once again, complaining works, especially when you're very, very loud about it. People were also threatening to boycott the game, the review bombs. It was just a lot of backlash that I think Sony really couldn't avoid. There's now a community-made operation if you don't know, in Helldivers 2 there are operations that are basically player-wide. That if the whole player base completes the operation, you get some kind of reward. Well, to deal with the negative review scores for the game, there was a community-made operation in real life, which I don't know if most gamers are familiar with, called Operation Cleanup, which now encourages players to leave positive Steam scores to correct the rating. So this shows that, the Helldivers community is really special, for better or worse. You had the negativity side of it when the, review bombing and things like that, which you could say is justifiable considering the shooting. So, the shooting of the foot that Sony did, making this link thing possibility, and how many people they were alienating from the game because of it. But then you also see the positive side, right? The reversing of this review bombing now that things have been corrected, that this link has been done away with. We are trying to make things right. And by we, I mean them, because I didn't do that. A fun note, well, this is not fun at all, actually. I don't know why I said that. An interesting note, the Helldivers 2 community manager was fired during this whole debacle for encouraging people to refund and negatively review the game. They did have a hilarious quote. They said, quote, "Generally, it's not a good idea to tell people to refund and leave negative reviews when you're a community manager." They said, "I appreciate all the support and appreciate even more that everyone can play the game again without restrictions. I knew I was taking a risk with what I said about refunding and changing reviews. I stand by it." And you got to respect that, right? You got to respect standing by your guns. Especially in an age where, when these cuts happen, people are terrified to speak out against the company doing the cuts because they don't want to get fired. When in reality, the company really doesn't care about you in the first place. So it's nice to see someone saying what they think and sticking by it, even if it did lead to them losing their job. At least they've still got their convictions, which you can't really pay your bills with convictions, but, it's nice to see that sometimes anyway. I think overall this shows how dedicated this Helldivers fan base is. And it also shows, I said it before, but it shows how tone deaf Sony can be. They had a money printing machine in Helldivers 2, and they basically poured water on it. And with those 177 countries still delisted, I wonder how this is going to affect Helldivers 2 going forward. Is this a permanent stain on the game, or is it going to bounce back? Personally, I think it's going to bounce back. I think the game is undeniable in so many ways. I mean, it's still ridiculously popular months after coming out. My friends and I still play it. It's in our regular rotation. New players are getting on all the time. I just hope that Sony takes this as a lesson for, one, how important this game is right now for their brand and for their lineup of games, and two, how to not make this mistake again, right? To be a little bit more conscious of how vocal this community can be and how, how bought in they are on this game, and that can pay off if you leverage it properly, not tanking the game, but instead rewarding that kind of dedication and player base. But anyway, that's going to wrap up the news portion for today's show. Like I said, some depressing stuff. You hate to talk about layoffs, but it is news, and it's something that is not going to go away. If it's going to keep happening. And of course, with the Sony blunder here with Helldivers 2, it's, corporations making decisions that are questionable. But anyway, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to get into the review portion of the show. You're listening to No Credits Rolled.
Insights into Teens, a podcast series exploring the issues and challenges of today's youth. Talking to real teens about real teen problems. Explore issues from braces to puberty, social anxiety to financial responsibility. Each week, we talk about the topics concerning today's youth. We look at how the issues affect teens, how to cope with these issues, and how parents, friends, and loved ones can help teens handle these challenges. Check out our video episodes on youtube.com/insightsintothings. Catch our audio versions on podcast.insightsintoteens.com or on the web at insightsintothings.com.
Whoa! All right, we're back on No Credits Rolled. Now it's time for the review portion of the show. First game we've got here is Fallout 76. Yes, that's right, folks. We're doing back-to-back weeks of Fallout reviews. For both of the games that I have to talk about today, I don't really have a whole lot to say. I've only just started both of them, but I did want to include them in the show just because I like to do reviews for these shows, either way. But I just wanted to give that caveat, take what I say with a grain of salt. You should always take what I say with a grain of salt, but in particular with these two reviews, just because I'm only a couple hours into each game. So if you don't know, Fallout 76 is the latest entry in the Fallout series. It came out a while ago still, but technically it's the latest entry. And it's Bethesda's attempt at a semi-MMO set in the Fallout universe. Like I said, I'm in the very early game still, but it's still got that addicting gameplay loop of any Fallout game that I've played. It's still fun to explore the environment and find, environmental storytelling or things on data logs or computers and just existing in this wasteland. This time around, it's actually not much of a wasteland. It's set in Appalachia, so you've got a lot more woods, a lot more trees, and you got a little bit of that in Fallout 4, but most people know Fallout 3 in New Vegas. It's a much more barren wasteland, a lot more open, vast spaces of nothingness. Fallout 76 is not really like that. It's lots of woods, mountainous terrain. It's different, which I really like, and it's one of the reasons I'm coming back to it is because I really do like exploring this environment and seeing the variety in the design and the trees and things like that. It's unique, and I think it's cool. I described Fallout New Vegas as a vibes game. 76 is no different. I think in general, Fallout is a vibes game. It's a vibes series. And I said last week I hate using the term vibes, but I'm going to do it again. It's fun to just put that radio on and just kind of wander the wasteland. For me personally, that really never gets old. Even if I'm just walking, instantly shooting something and instantly killing it without much of a fight. It's fun to just exist in that universe with the music, with the atmosphere of those games. And this game as well, I kind of just hang out. The gameplay itself is pretty slow-paced, as you'd expect from a Fallout game. It does take a lot of notes from Fallout 4 in terms of how they changed the combat in that game. A lot of quality-of-life stuff. The guns are pretty similar to what you find in Fallout 4 as well. A lot of they introduced these pipe weapons that were part of their push to make guns moddable. A lot of crafting involved in Fallout 4. All those systems exist in 76, right? The base building that they had in 4, the gun modification, the armor modification, all that stuff got put into 76 as part of making it like an MMO. And they've really doubled down on those mechanics as well. The combat is definitely not the highlight of this game, and I didn't really go into it expecting it to be. It's the storytelling. It's the environment. It's wandering around, like I've said a bunch of times in this review. I'm still finding cool side quests and stories as I journey through the world, but I'm basically so far only fighting small animals, large. There's these naked mole rats you can basically one-shot. There's these really terrifying possum creatures. I really don't like them. I don't know what they're called in the game, but it's like a mutated possum. It's like the size of a tire, and it's got like 2 heads. Possums in general just kind of freak me out, so it having 2 heads kind of a problem. This is an anti-possum podcast. I hate to break it to you. But the design is cool. And it's something we haven't seen in a Fallout game before. You expect rad roaches or bloat flies and things like that. But because it's in a different setting, it's presenting these new enemy types. The main enemies I've been fighting are the Scorched, which are a lot like ghouls, but apparently different. They're like these zombies that run at you and you shoot them and they die pretty much immediately. Sometimes they have guns. I know there are different Scorched enemies. Like I briefly saw a Scorched beast, which is like a dragon. It looked like a dragon. I don't know what it's supposed to be. Like I said, I'm very early in the game, but I do hope we get a little bit more enemy variety from the Scorched, because so far it has just been these basically ghouls that you'd find in another Fallout game, but they're never really much of a threat. I've never gotten close to dying. I've got like 50 stims, so even if I did, I could just instantly heal. But again, the combat is really not what's drawing me in here. It's the exploration. I've attempted to con my friends into downloading it, so I'm curious how the Fallout game will feel when you're not alone, right? So much of this game is about being alone and wandering. What is that like when you've got friends with you and you're all wandering together? Will it be boring? Maybe. We'll see. But this game definitely has its hooks in me. I keep wanting to pop on, walk around for a bit, or just complete one more quest. And those are the aspects that remind me a lot of an MMO. I played a lot of Star Wars The Old Republic Online, and it was that drive of just, all right, let me accept all these quests, wander out into the open world, and then come back and turn in all these quests, and you get that dopamine rush, turning in quest after quest after quest, seeing your XP go up. It's a fun gameplay loop, and I think they've implemented that well in the Fallout gameplay system. Like I said, they've kept a lot of the base building stuff. Now it's a camp system where you've got a camp hub, essentially, but you can move the camp as you explore the open world. I haven't really figured out what the point of this is yet. You can definitely build a base, but for where I'm at now, I'm moving my camp a lot because I have to, you need your chest where you dump your extra loot, or you need crafting benches, which you all have to craft every time you make a new camp, by the way, which is annoying. But I wonder if, as you get further into the game, if you're supposed to establish a more permanent base, and I guess that would tie in with the PvP elements of the game, because there is PvP. If you want it, you can find that. You can fight other players. And I've seen, the map is actually a highlight of the game. It's designed like a map you'd see for like a national park or like a theme park, which is different from the other Fallout games. It's really cool. It's fun to look at that map. It's got all kinds of little designs on it. But you can also see other player bases and other player encampments. So I've seen those. I haven't encountered any other players yet, but I know that they're out there, and I wonder if that is where that camp system will come into play. So far, I'm just playing it like a single-player Fallout game, so we'll see what that's like once I get into those multiplayer aspects. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got for Fallout 76 so far. Like I said, still very early in the game, but I'm still enjoying it. It's definitely got its hooks in me. And even though it is semi-mindless, I still enjoy getting in there, leveling up, getting new gear, exploring new environments. It's a lot of fun. The game is free, not free, but if you've got something like a Games Pass or the Sony PlayStation equivalent of a Games Pass, it's up a lot of places. I know Amazon was just giving it away for the Fallout show, so you can probably pick it up severely discounted or maybe free if you've got any one of these services. So the second game I want to talk about today is Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. Still a mouthful of a title all these months later. I know I did cover maybe the first episode of this show. I covered this game and its sales numbers and how disappointing people found it. Despite that, I've personally been very excited to talk about this game for a while. And thankfully, Gamefly came through. I'm not sponsored by Gamefly. Not yet. I'd like to be. But I have signed up for Gamefly sort of for this show because, I've been duped before buying games only to have them become available on Games Pass or PlayStation Games Pass the next day, or to have them get discounted, or to just buy a game and not like it, and I'm just stuck with that purchase. So with gameplay, I'm able to sort of skirt that and pay one flat fee per month and get those games one at a time, play them. If I don't like them, send them back, no problem. Again, not sponsored, but I'd like to be. Anyway, back to Suicide Squad. I know this game did not get well reviewed, but it seemed like something that might be up my alley. I know I talked about that when I covered it before, about enjoying that kind of mindless looter-shooter grind of something like a Destiny or a Borderlands, and that was what this game looked like, and that's pretty much what this game is. So far, I've only put maybe 5 to 6 hours in. I haven't even killed a Justice League member yet. I know, you're saying, Sam, what is even the point? You're supposed to kill the Justice League. Well, I'm taking every side quest possible just to get the right gear, because they basically make you do that before you do the big Justice League mission, Justice League member mission. The first one you get is a Green Lantern fight, but you've got to level and grind to get the right gear. It is the most bare bones, cut and dry grind you can imagine. So if you don't like that, you're not going to enjoy this game. It turns out, a lot of those reviews were accurate. The game is very aggressively middle of the road. It is a looter shooter, and like I said, in the most bare bones of sense. You are shooting, and you sometimes get loot. Some pros, all right? Let's start with the pros. I'm coming very negative at this, but there are pros. The visuals in cutscenes, I want to emphasize that, in cutscenes are great. The game is graphically very impressive, in particular when it comes to character models. When there are close-ups on characters like Harley Quinn and Captain Boomerang especially, they look fantastic. It's the team behind the Arkham games, so you still have that visual fidelity that they've always had, even going back all the way to Arkham City and Arkham Asylum. Obviously, those games are a little bit older, but they still had the art direction to back it up, which still lets them hold up to this day. In this case, it's mostly just graphics, just graphical power. And like I said, Harley Quinn and Captain Boomerang in particular are really standouts in terms of looking like real human beings. King Shark, it's a little bit tough because he's a shark, and Deadshot wears a helmet a lot of the time, so what are you going to do? Another pro, the traversal is fun. It's a bit janky depending on what character you use. In the beginning of the game, before you pick a character to start the actual campaign with, they have you play as all 4 characters so you can kind of get a feel for them. I started my main campaign as Captain Boomerang just because I think the Flash is cool and I wanted to have Flash powers, which is what Captain Boomerang has. But recently I switched to Deadshot because I had heard that he was the most fun character to play as, and that is correct. Deadshot is by far the most fun character to play as. He's got a jetpack, which is way cooler than anything else that any other character has. King Shark just kind of jumps. He's like the Hulk, sort of. Harley Quinn has a grapple hook, which they try to emulate the grapple hook. If you've played it in the Arkham games, the grapple hook tether and then overshoot and diving, and there's no gliding. It's just the grapple hook. She kind of swings like Spider-Man. But I really think they botched it. It does not feel as good as it did in those Arkham games, which is a shame because you'd think that they would just be able to translate that one-to-one and have it work. But the biggest, well, actually, I'll save that for the cons part. I'm still in the pros part, believe it or not. The Deadshot's a lot of fun. It's for Captain Boomerang. I stopped playing as him because it's a very cool concept. He essentially has Speed Force gauntlets that lets him teleport, but it's tough to make that fun in gameplay when you're just sitting there waiting for your boomerang to get somewhere so you can teleport to it. You're just watching it fly. It's the same thing that happened in Gotham Knights, if anybody ever played that. Tim Drake in that game, Robin, he also teleported, and you essentially were just sitting there waiting to select a point to teleport to, which is not fun inherently, I don't think. It defeats the point of traversal when you're just teleporting, zipping from location to location. Like I said, Deadshot has a jetpack, so you can fly in any direction. Then you can also, there's like an afterburner thing you can do where you can boost. Then if you get too close to overheating, you can hit another button, and he kind of does like a little jump, which gives you another bar of jetpack, which then, you can continue flying. So it's kind of a fun dance controlling your overheating with your boost, with your which way you want to go before you get to the next rooftop, before you overheat. And I did find that pretty enjoyable. But now on to the cons. The cons are pretty much everything else. The gunplay is pretty boring, with all the characters feeling very similar. I mean, they even can overlap in their guns, right? Deadshot can use a revolver. Harley Quinn can use a revolver. There's revolvers, SMGs, assault rifles, snipers, and shotguns, and then only King Shark can use heavy LMGs like a minigun. For the most part, a lot of these guns overlap between the different characters. So everybody kind of ends up feeling the same. Everyone just shoots guns, and that's it. It's surprising, especially when you've got these distinct characters. Why would you not make them feel distinct? I mean, they all have their own travel methods, their own traversal methods, but when it comes down to the actual gunplay, you're just shooting people. I found that Deadshot, again, is a lot of fun because he can hover in midair with his jetpack to shoot, so that's a little bit different than a Captain Boomerang, who you can zip around to a certain extent, but at the end of the day, you have a shotgun. So you're zipping in, blasting with a shotgun, zipping away. It sounds kind of fun when I describe it like that, but it's really not. At the end of the day, you're just shooting everything in the head. There are also a lot of weird aspects to the gunplay. There's this thing called counter shots, where if something is about to shoot you or just shot you, you can do a counter shot, which sometimes breaks its shield, so then you can damage it. There's a shield recharge mechanic where if you shoot enemies in the legs, you can then do a melee attack on them and recharge your shield, and that's the only way to get shield back. It's really strange. It was like they were confined to this gun mechanic, the fact that everybody has to shoot guns, and then they wanted to make it feel unique and kind of do their own thing within the world of it being a third-person shooter. It ends up just being really complicated because you end up getting mission after mission where the gimmick of the mission is, well, this enemy will only take damage if you countershot him, which just means you're sitting there waiting, doing no damage to this enemy until your countershot recharges. Then you shoot him with that, then you can do damage. It just like artificially extends the gameplay. So that's not fun. The biggest issue, well, one of the biggest issues I've encountered is in gameplay. The gameplay is like ridiculously visually noisy. I sent a clip to Joe the other day of all the things popping up on screen, and you can read anybody's review or look at anybody's review or gameplay, and you'll see it right away. The amount of things that pop up on screen, but from damage numbers to health to objective markers to just visual effects, it is overwhelming. And, I play a lot of video games. I've been playing games my whole life. It takes a lot for me to become visually overwhelmed. And this game did it pretty much right away. Like to the point where I had no idea what was happening sometimes because I'm in a group of enemies and I'm meleeing and hitting them up in the air and blowing up and shooting and flying. And it was just... It's like a joke, right? It feels like it's a meme of how much there is on screen. I talked about last week the TikTok thing of having so many visual stimuli, and this is like that game. This is the game if you want to be visually stimulated to the point of like going into a coma. There are so many things on screen that you can't even tell what's happening. And from what I can tell, there is a disable HUD button, but I don't know how much that would help because I don't think you can go in and disable individual visual elements like I would expect. You're kind of just stuck with it. And it is very, very overwhelming. The writing is kind of cringe. It's a little bit closer to David Ayer's Suicide Squad than James Gunn's Suicide Squad, if you catch my drift. The location, it's set in Metropolis, which should be amazing, especially from the people who made Gotham in those Arkham games so memorable. Unfortunately, you spend an insane amount of time on rooftops. They even say right in the beginning of the game, it's too dangerous to go in the street. Don't go in the street. Now, there's really not a gameplay reason for that. I mean, sometimes there's tanks on the ground, but nothing is hard to kill in this game. Everything you can just demolish. You're a god, effectively. You spend so much time on, I would say you spend 95% of your time in this game on rooftops. And so you don't really see Metropolis at the ground level. Everything you do, you're just flying from rooftop to rooftop to rooftop. Maybe sometimes it's a higher building, or maybe sometimes it's a lower building. It reminds me of DC Universe Online, which is a deep cut. I don't know if anyone still plays that game, but I remember in that game running around, I think it was Metropolis, whatever the starting area is in that game when you're a good guy. And it's just like this barren, like empty city, and you're just running straight up a building waiting to get to the top of it. It reminded me a lot of that. So you don't really get a feel for the city like you would in the Batman games, other than just looking down on it from a rooftop. And there's not enough visual distinction from the different districts. Especially in Arkham Knight, they did a great job with that, making each district feel unique. In this version of Metropolis, they really don't do that, which is a shame because I think Metropolis is a great location that we haven't really seen fully fleshed out in a lot of games, especially with this kind of budget. But anyway, I do plan to finish the main story. It does interest me, sort of. I'm a fan of these characters. I'm a comic book fan. I'm a DC fan. So it is fun to see this scenario play out, even if the gameplay is not fun. I do want to see the Justice League. They do a good job showing how good the Justice League are, like to the point of parody before they all get turned into like demons. So I'm sure they're going to go a million degrees in the other direction once we see these characters in their evil version. We get Kevin Conroy's Batman, which is great, even though Batman is obviously evil in this. He's killing people, but he's like the big brother in the game, which I think is kind of fun. He's the one running things on the ground, and you get Kevin Conroy hamming it up as an evil Batman. I know people were disappointed that this is one of his last performances, and this is how they're showing the character. I really don't have a problem with it. I think it's fun. You can tell he's having fun with it too. I think, like I said, he's hamming it up, being this evil, like dictator Batman. I think it's fun. What else do we have here for it? I just wanted to say, and this is really just for me, the game is worse than the Avengers game, which is surprising, right? I'm a diehard fan of that Avengers game. I will go to bat for it. At least in the Avengers game, each character felt unique and had unique abilities. In this game, if you didn't have the character models, right, like if you didn't know you were playing as King Shark or didn't know you were playing as Harley Quinn, the shooting mechanic, you would feel, everybody feels the same for the most part, right? There are very little differences from character to character, which is ridiculous considering it is a multiplayer game. It's an always online game that has multiplayer in it. And you can have, theoretically, a squad of 4 where everybody is playing as their own character, their own unique DC character. And most of the time, it just feels like 4 goons with guns just shooting people. But yes, the moral of the story here is sometimes reviews are correct, and you should trust them, because this game lived up to every review that I ever read in terms of it being very middle of the road, in terms of it being boring, in terms of the gunplay. Yeah, all that was correct. But those are my thoughts on Suicide Squad and Fallout 76. Let me know what you think. I'm curious if any of you are getting back into Fallout 76 with the show, or if you tried Suicide Squad at launch and didn't like it, or you did like it. Maybe you're still playing it, because there is a battle pass, by the way. Maybe you're grinding the battle pass to get all your Joker skins and stuff. I don't know. But anyway, that's going to wrap up episode 8 of No Credits Rolled. Thank you so much for listening. Of course, you can always email questions or comments to nocreditsrolled@gmail.com. We'll always be happy to hear from you. I plugged it at the beginning of the show, but you can always call in. Leave us a voicemail at 856-209-0713. That's 856-209-0713, and we might just play it on the air. Make sure to subscribe to No Credits Rolled on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe, leave a review if you can. All that helps us out quite a bit. If you're feeling generous, we do have a Patreon. You can subscribe there, and you can recommend what I should be playing, what I should be talking about. I would love to hear from you as well. But that's going to do it for today's episode of No Credits Rolled. I'll see you next time.
Insights into Teens, a podcast series exploring the issues and challenges of today's youth. Talking to real teens about real teen problems. Explore issues from braces to puberty, social anxiety to financial responsibility. Each week, we talk about the topics concerning today's youth. We look at how the issues affect teens, how to cope with these issues, and how parents, friends, and loved ones can help teens handle these challenges. Check out our video episodes on youtube.com/insightsintothings. Catch our audio versions on podcast.insightsintoteens.com or on the web at insightsintothings.com.
credits rolled.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 6 of No Credits Rolled. My name is Sam Whalen, and today I'm going to be covering a smattering of news stories, my thoughts on Dragon's Dogma 2, and maybe a few bonus games. But before we get into that, I want to remind everyone to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast. That includes Spotify, Apple, and now YouTube as well. You can look us up, No Credits Rolled, wherever you get those services. Also, if you're on Deezer, I would like to keep plugging Deezer because I think it's funny. But if all my Deez heads out there, please leave a comment. Let me know if you're listening on Deezer. If you're feeling generous, the show also has a Patreon. You can just search No Credits Rolled on there as well. Every little bit helps. This is a semi-independent operation, which I guess really doesn't make any sense if you think about the word semi-independent. We've also got a call-in line, and I want to hear from you. Call in at 856-209-0713. That's 856-209-0713. And let me know what you're playing and what I should be playing and what I should be talking about. All right, I think I got everything off the top. Let's get into our first story. The headline reads, 60% of playtime in 2023 went to 6-year-old or older games, new data shows. This comes from Kotaku, as well as a research firm called Newzoo. The story is from Zach Zuizen. I think that's right. Zach, if you're listening to this, I apologize if I mispronounced your name. But he says, quote, Newzoo's data shows that just 66 titles accounted for 80% of all playtime in 2023. And 60% of that playtime was spent in games that are 6 years or older. In fact, in 2023, 5 old games, Fortnite, Roblox, League of Legends, Minecraft, and GTA 5 accounted for 27% of all playtime in the year. That's about a quarter for all you math heads out there. Of the 23% of playtime spent in 2023 on new games, which are defined, new here as being defined as 2 years or younger, more than half was spent in big annual sequels like the latest Madden or NBA game. And this last part is what really made me want to talk about this on the show. Zach says, quote, only 8% of video game playtime was spent on new, non-annual titles like Diablo 4 and Baldur's Gate 3. 8% on new games. And again, for the purposes of this research, new is being classified as 2 years or younger, which isn't even really new if you think about it, at least by my standards. But 8% of playtime spent on these new games. So what do we do with that data, right? What does that data make you think of? For me, it shows how difficult it is for new games to break out and remain relevant, especially when you're dealing with these juggernauts like a Fortnite, a Roblox, League of Legends, Minecraft, GTA 5. All of these games, by the way, are 10 plus years old. Crazy to think about that they're still this dominant. I think this is a trend with lots of different kinds of media today. You see it a lot in movies, this trend of sequels and remakes and requels that sort of dominate what people go and see and what people like to see, and in this case, what people like to play. I think there's the familiarity of it. I think that's the biggest thing. People are much more likely to dive into something that they already know or something based off something they know, instead of just going headlong into a new property or a new experience that they might not be as familiar with. So how can new games compete when established titans like Fortnite take up so much of the player base? It's tough, right? I mean, I'm not a game developer, but I imagine it's got to be extremely tough if you're making a new game and you're gunning for that 8% of the player base. You know, that's a very small margin of the player base, and there's a lot of new games that come out every year. And again, for this research, new is 2 years or younger. So we're going back to 2022. Had to look at the calendar because I did not know the year. But, you know, that's not that new going back 2 years. And they're still fighting over this 8% of the player base. Now, there are some exceptions, like the article cited, like Baldur's Gate 3. And what makes something like a Baldur's Gate 3 break out and capture so many gamers, right? What makes it such a presence in the public discussion that allows it to kind of defy this data and kind of have its own voice and its own moment in the gaming space? In my opinion, I think a lot of this comes down to what kind of gamer you are. And I know it's kind of cringe to use the word gamer, but I'm gonna. I think a lot of people are very casual gamers, and I don't mean that as an insult. I think a lot of people just, you know, they work their 9 to 5 and they come home and they hop on Fortnite or they hop on Warzone and you know, get destroyed by a 13-year-old and then call it a day. But, those kids too, those 13-year-olds, they might just only play Fortnite, right? They might only play Roblox. They might only play Warzone, and they don't really branch out a whole lot. And I think for those kind of gamers, that's why your Fortnites, your Roblox, your League of Legends, your Minecrafts, your GTA 5s remain so popular, because there's constant updates to these games. There's a built-in constant player base, as we can clearly see here. And for most of these, excluding, Minecraft and a GTA 5, you can hop on, you can do a match, and your time with the game can stop there. Now, that's not counting, in Fortnite and Roblox, there's like games within games, and in Minecraft as well. We're not counting that. I mean, like the core of what the game is. League of Legends matches are a lot longer than that. But my point is, you can do whatever you do in your day-to-day life, hop into these games, get your fix of the game, and then kind of go back to your regular life. And I think that there are a lot of casual gamers that is what they're doing. It's not, they're not looking for the next groundbreaking single-player RPG, and that's okay. That doesn't have to appeal to everybody. But I think that the large amount of the player base for your Fortnites is this casual audience, and it's what these Titan games kind of rely on to keep the lights on. Now, this brings us back to a Baldur's Gate 3 and what makes a game like that appeal to a more casual gamer. I think a lot of it comes down to word of mouth, right? We're seeing that with Helldivers 2 right now as well. TikTok, Instagram, social media in general, you're seeing these clips of these games, and you get the feeling of FOMO, right? The feeling of missing out. You say, oh, well, this looks like a ton of fun. Look at all these fun clips I'm seeing. I want to go play this game. I want to branch out and try something new that I might not, that might not appeal to me just on the cover art alone, or the trailer for the game alone. If I'm a casual gamer and I'm seeing that this game is extremely popular, it might entice me to want to go over and give it a shot. And then maybe I'll stick with it if it's a Baldur's Gate and I get wrapped up in the story or the characters. Or if it's a Helldivers 2, I get stuck in the gameplay and that loop of doing missions, and I'm hooked, and there's your 8% that are playing new games. I think accessibility also plays a big part in what allows a new game to break out. How easy is the game to pick up? I know for me, I don't PC game really ever. So games like Lethal Company that I'm seeing get that social media hype and get that online presence, I'm not going to go play because, one, none of my friends are on PC, and two, I don't really play on PC to begin with. So when I'm saying accessibility, I guess I more so mean availability. How easy is the game to pick up and purchase? What's the price point, right? Because if you're talking about a $70 game, someone that might not play your single player epics, it might be a tough sell for them to slap down $70+ on a game they might not even like. It's easier to get something that's free to play, like a Fortnite or a Roblox or League. Minecraft's always on sale. GTA 5 is on sale a lot too. So the barrier to entry in terms of a price point for those very popular old games, quote-unquote old games, is a lot lower based on that as well. You're taking a lot more of a leap of faith with your $70 on a new game that you might not like, and return policies nowadays are extremely fickle, so you might just be stuck with it. This data also ties into a topic we covered, 2 episodes ago, I think, talking about live service games. Of these 5 old games that are 27% of playtime, Fortnite, Roblox, League, GTA 5, those are all live service games. I don't know if you'd count Minecraft as a live service game because you can just do single player stuff and that you don't necessarily have to do online stuff. But Fortnite, Roblox, League, and GTA, those are all live service games that are ridiculously successful and ridiculously profitable. So I think that speaks to, from a company standpoint, from a brand standpoint, the benefits of a live service game and what all these various companies want when they make a live service game. They want it to become a household name that, 10 years down the line, people are still playing and still making up more than a quarter of gamers' playtime. Unfortunately, that diamond in the rough that a lot of companies are looking for is a lot harder nowadays to get to than it was back when Fortnite came out. Back when League started. I don't even know when that was. I don't play League, but probably a long time ago. It's tough to make that breakout hit. One that comes to mind for me is Apex Legends. When that game came out, it had the backing of Respawn, the folks that, like myself, that were Titanfall fans, working some of those mechanics into a live service battle royale is kind of what made it have some staying power. But for every Apex, there's, a Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, or what's another terrible example? I was playing this game called Hawked, Hawked. That's like it's like an extraction shooter where you're underground. The servers are still on, but it's not really getting a lot of hype. I mean, for every Apex, there's a dozen other live service games that are going to fail. So it's like the definition of feast or famine when it comes to these live service games. And I really think that these 5 Titans that we're talking about here that are live service are very much the exception and not the rule. But I think companies see dollar signs and they want to take their stab at it without really giving the proper foundation for what these live service games need to have a successful launch and to have the staying power to make people want to continue to play them. I think a lot of the time, companies just want that instant hit, that instant gratification, and that instant profit, of course, but they don't really think of it particularly far ahead. I mean, sure, you might get a content roadmap, right? I mean, shout out Marvel's Avengers. I reinstalled that the other day and played a little bit of it just because I love that game so much. But that game had a content roadmap that ended up being a detriment to the game itself because they had to keep moving deadlines and they had to keep, reworking what the content map was. And that's the surefire way to kill your live service game, because if you set up this roadmap where there are dates to hit and you don't hit those dates, people are going to fall off because there's no new content and there's no reason to keep coming back to this game. We get into the discussion of crunch, right, where it's something like a Fortnite. I don't remember. I don't have the details in front of me, but I remember there was a crunch story about that. And when you play Fortnite and they're pumping out new content every 2 weeks, whether that be unvaulting items or putting new things in or changing up the gameplay, it's a juggernaut for Epic, so they can dedicate the resources and the time to that. But there is an element of crunch to that where you have to keep feeding the beast. So on one hand, you've got the content roadmap that could, be your death knell if you don't end up following it. But then you don't want to overwork your workers to the point that they're crunching to keep up with the live service trend. And that's not even mentioning the development teams that work on these live service games that might get shut down within a month of their release. Rest in peace, Knockout City. I've mentioned that before, but that was a great game, in my opinion, that had a lot of potential, that it did get content updates, but I think the player base just fell off. And for me personally, me and my friends, we stopped playing because people just got way better than us, and we were just getting destroyed in every lobby. And I could do a whole show on MMR and how your skill-based matchmaking and my thoughts on that, and maybe I will if I'm desperate for topics. That's not really the live service game's fault. All live service games and all multiplayer games are going to have skill-based matchmaking. But again, that's another show. But I want to know, are you playing any of the games I mentioned today? Are you a Fortnite fan? Are you into Roblox? I know my friends and I tried Roblox once. It was a lot, and we couldn't really figure it out. But it does have an update like every week on PS5, so I'm sure they're adding new content. But yeah, let me know if you're playing any of these games. Are you in that 8% that's branching out and playing new games, or are you more of the casual gamer that's playing the same 2 or 3 multiplayer shooters and then hopping off for the day? Let me know. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to get into some more of the news. You're listening to No Credits Rolled.
Insights into Teens, a podcast series exploring the issues and challenges of today's youth. Talking to real teens about real teen problems. Explore issues from braces to puberty, social anxiety to financial responsibility. Each week, we talk about the topics concerning today's youth. We look at how the issues affect teens, how to cope with these issues, and how parents, friends, and loved ones can help teens handle these challenges. Check out our video episodes on youtube.com/insightsintothings. Catch our audio versions on podcast.insightsintoteens.com. or on the web at insightsintothings.com.
All right, and we're back on No Credits Rolled. We just got done talking about some data from Newzoo about what people are playing. But now in this next segment, I decided to call it the News Roundup. I was going to make a cool jingle, but I ran out of time. So just imagine like a cool Old West cowboy song here for the News Roundup. Maybe I had some whip sound effects that I was pretty proud of. Some cracking, some horse galloping. But that didn't make it to air. Maybe one day, though. Anyway, so our first story here comes from IGN. Rebecca Valentine over at IGN. She's a fantastic reporter, but it's about the KOTOR remake, Knights of the Old Republic. For all my Star Wars fans out there, I know this one probably makes you cringe because we've been teased with this KOTOR remake for a long time now. And I thought it was dead for sure. I thought we weren't going to see any more of it, but alas, Rebecca Valentine over at IGN doing the Lord's work. She actually interviewed Saber Interactive CEO Matthew Karch, K-A-R-C-H. Saber is the team that took over from Aspyr to do this KOTOR remake. If you remember, again for all my Star Wars fans out there, Aspyr recently handled the Battlefront collection, the 1 and 2 collection, which was a complete disaster. So maybe it's a good thing they lost the project. But now Saber's doing it, which is cool because lightsaber, was that on purpose? Maybe, maybe not. But anyway, Rebecca Valentine talked to CEO Matthew Karch, and he said this, quote, "It's clear and it's obvious that we're working on this being the KOTOR remake." He said it's been in the press numerous times. What I will say is that the game is alive and well, and we're dedicated to making sure we exceed consumer expectations. A little bit of corporate speak in there, but hey, that's something, I guess. Is he saying that just to keep investors in? Is he saying that just to keep the name of the game in the press? Maybe a little bit of all that. The guy's a CEO, so I feel like he chooses his words very deliberately, especially in situations like this where he knows it's going to get a headline. But ultimately, what does this really mean, right? I don't think it means a whole lot. Embracer Group, which Saber left recently, Embracer Group held an earnings call after Saber left to announce the leaving. And Embracer Group, they implied on the earnings call that the game is still far away, perhaps in a galaxy far, far away. But like I said, the KOTOR remake used to be under development with Aspyr. They lost the project because of a lack of progress, which is maybe telling given the state of the Battlefront collection, which is essentially the same game ported with no changes, not even any performance improvements. It's the same game that it was 10 years ago. I could do a whole other episode on that as well, because I spoke about that Battlefront collection on this show and got very excited and was very let down by it. But anyway, Saber now has the project. When are we going to see this game? I have no idea. I think he was just, Rebecca Valentine probably just wanted to get the confirmation from him that the game was still out there, just to kind of keep it in the public zeitgeist. I have no idea when we're going to see this game. I believe there was a thing where they took down that trailer that showed Revan remade. That they took it down, but it was because of a music licensing thing, I think. I don't remember. That freaked a lot of people out because they were like, if they're taking the trailer down, then are we going to ever see this game? I feel like this is just, especially with the success of Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth, I feel like the KOTOR remake, if you give that the same treatment, is going to make you like $1 bajillion, right? Because people still rave about KOTOR 1 and 2, sort of, mostly 1. I've tried playing them. I just can't really. The game's so old. It's so old. So, and I know you probably hate me for saying that if you're above the age of 30 and that was your favorite Star Wars game ever. But, it's old. It's an old game. But again, it's that Final Fantasy VII comparison where that game is also really old, but it's beloved, and the remake of it is incredible. It's a new kind of game. And I think that's the exact same kind of treatment you got to give KOTOR here. I think if you give the KOTOR remake that budget and that, especially that level of production that the Final Fantasy remakes have, I think it's a shoo-in. I think people are going to be looking for something a little bit more than just a graphical upgrade. I think people are going to want, at least people my age, are going to want a gameplay shakeup, because the gameplay of that original game, in my opinion, is pretty dated. And it's confusing. Like, that's why I never got particularly far in it. I think if you do something, again, the Final Fantasy comparison, how they changed up and made that a little more active, a little bit more involved, I think it could, have a lot more mass market appeal. And it's Star Wars, so you've already got a huge audience built in there. So we'll see where this goes. Like I said, I doubt we're going to hear anything about it anytime soon. If we do, I will be pleasantly surprised. And if we do, I hope it's something with some meat on the bones. Anyway, this next story really isn't news, but I put it in the show because I like Helldivers and I want an excuse to talk about it. We've got Helldivers patch notes, patch 01.000.200. For all of you keeping track at home, it's that number, patch note. It added all kinds of new stuff. We got some new planetary hazards, blizzards, and sandstorms. So far, my friends and I have only experienced the blizzards. They're very cool. It helps complete the Star Wars fantasy because you feel like you're on Hoth. And the immersiveness of the blizzards, very cool. You can make snowballs and throw snowballs at people. That's fun. They tweaked some enemy spawns, some mission types, adjusted the mechanics of others. There's like a civilian rescue mission. They've decreased the number of civilians you have to save. So I guess morally speaking, our duty to those extra civilians we're leaving behind is a little bit questionable. But hey, we don't make the rules. Some weapons got buffed, like the anti-material rifle, which I think is cool. The Breaker, Incendiary, and the Dominator have all been buffed. And the new heavy machine gun, which I'm a big fan of. It had its fire rate decrease, but who really noticed? Anyway, like I said, this isn't news. Not really, but I just wanted to include it because I like talking about this game. If you want more of my thoughts on it, you can listen to last week's episode where my pal Joe and I talked about it for about 30 minutes-ish. The game continues to be a ton of fun. My friends and I, it's in our rotation now of the games that we regularly play. We've got about 4 or 5 games we rotate around with, and Helldivers is definitely at the top. It's still a ton of fun, and every patch, it's something to look forward to. And I haven't really had that experience with the game in a while. I would say maybe back when we were deep in Fortnite and we were checking the patches that, every time they came out to see what new weapons were added. We're back there. We're back there with Helldivers 2, and everything they add and every change they make, and finding it out in real time is a lot of fun. Not necessarily reading the patch notes before you do a couple matches, but then discovering that, oh, there's blizzards now, or oh, there's this new environment you can play in. And it creates a sense of discovery that I think a lot of games that we, at least my friends and I play, are lacking. We play Apex, we play Siege, we know for the most part what we're getting into. But Helldivers has its own kind of, its own brand of fun, I think, that makes every mission continue to feel unique and the game overall to just be an absolute slam dunk. Oh, there have also been teases of robot spaceships. I think those might be in the game. I don't know. But that looked cool. I hope they let us fly spaceships. There was also the very serious reclaiming of Malevelon Creek. There's a whole backstory to that I missed out on initially, but the collective we, have regained Malevelon Creek, and everybody got a cape for it. And it's things like that really contribute to the community feeling of this game. Everybody was wondering if they were going to do some kind of April Fool's joke for Helldivers 2, but instead there was this big push to everyone, for all the troopers, or all the players, troopers, who can really tell anymore, to regain these couple planets. And I think the time was 24 hours to do it, but the player base did it in 5, which is pretty cool. And then everybody got a commemorative, cosmetic cape to commemorate the event. I don't know. I think stuff like that is cool. It brings me back to when I used to play Star Wars: The Old Republic online, an MMO. But it's that sense of community, really. And I really don't feel that in a whole lot of other games. So Helldivers 2, go check it out if you haven't already. All right, we're going to take another break. And when we come back, we're going to get into the review portion of the show where I'm going to be talking about Dragon's Dogma 2. We'll be right back.
Insights into Entertainment, a podcast series taking a deeper look into entertainment and media. Our husband and wife team of pop culture fanatics are exploring all things from music and movies to television and fandom. We'll look at the interesting and obscure entertainment news of the week. We'll talk about theme park and pop culture news. We'll give you the latest and greatest on pop culture conventions. We'll give you a deep dive into Disney, Star Wars, and much more. Check out our video episodes at youtube.com/insightsintothings. Our audio episodes at podcast.insightsintoentertainment.com, or check us out on the web at insightsintothings.com.
All right, and we're back on No Credits Rolled. We just got done discussing the news for this week, and now we're going to talk some reviews. This week I'm talking about Dragon's Dogma 2. This review has been a long time coming. I have been obsessed with this game. I say that a lot. But when a game captures my imagination and really captures my time, I think it's especially worth talking about on this show. But Dragon's Dogma 2 is a fantasy action RPG coming from Capcom, developed and published by Capcom. It's using the RE engine, which kind of looks good sometimes. I'll get more into that in a second. The game isn't perfect. It's captured my attention since it came out a couple weeks ago. Whenever I'm not online with my friends, this is the game I've been going to. Whenever I'm not in the multiplayer space, I'm booting up Dragon's Dogma 2 and I'm running around. I'm maybe doing a side quest or just existing in this world because it's just so much fun. My top level thoughts on Dragon's Dogma 2. The game is a lot of fun, but it's not without its flaws. It's not a game I can recommend to everyone, but if you can power through the more obtuse aspects of it, the gameplay and the world is where Dragon's Dogma 2 really shines. Some positives I have here. Overall, there's like two big positives that I want to highlight. The world is very immersive and feels very lived in and dynamic. I think that's the best way to describe it. There's a lot of dynamic moments that can happen throughout regular gameplay. For example, the fast travel in the game kind of works where you take these ox carts, these carriages that ride from city to city, and you have the option to ride in real time, but I wouldn't recommend that. You can doze off, which is essentially skipping time, and your character will just wake up in the next whatever the destination is. But along the way, you can be attacked. You can be attacked by bandits or goblins or griffins or trolls or whatever. And you have to fight those things off. And these encounters are completely dynamic. They're not staged. I don't know how they did it, honestly. Everything in the world has its own pattern of existing. And when these patterns overlap, you get these really cool dynamic moments. One example of that is the ox carts, where you wake up and you suddenly have to fight an ogre. You get back on the cart, go to your destination. But while you're fighting that ogre, some goblins might show up, or another group of heroes might show up they're all NPCs. It's not a multiplayer game, but this other troop of adventurers might show up and join in and help you fight. And then after the fact, you can hire some of those people to join your party. They're called pawns, which is a little dystopian, but they're called pawns and they can join your party as NPCs and help you out. There's, the different classes, which I'll get to in a second, but it's moments like that really stand out for me. For example, I was fighting a griffin, like a big bird monster thing, and then a troll showed up, and I was like, well, this is going to be tough to fight both. Then they started fighting each other, so I just ran away, and I was like, oh, well, that deals with itself. Time passes in real time, so if you go to an inn and rest like 5 times in a row, all the food in your inventory will rot, and you just can't eat any of it. Different NPCs in cities will go about their daily lives, whether that be a merchant or if, I've got a quest right now where I have to tail this beggar, this like homeless guy, but he walks a specific route during the day before he posts up where he does his show, like his little act, I guess, where you have to meet him. So I'm like waiting all day for him to show up to the spot, and I'm still waiting. And, you know, as the time goes by, and I'm just sitting on this bench waiting for this guy to show up because it's the pattern he does in his daily life. The combat is the other big standout of the game. I'm playing as a warrior, which is an extra class you get in the game. I think the initial classes, they're called vocations, but they're basically classes. It's like your typical affair, your thief class, your wizard class, your warrior class, and then you can unlock a handful more as you go, depending on if you find certain weapon types that allows you to unlock the other branches. But the warrior, he has a big giant sword, and that was why I went for that vocation, because I think that's cool, and I think anytime I can get a big giant sword, I'm going to get a big giant sword. But one of the mechanics in the game for when you're fighting these larger enemies like trolls and ogres and things like that, there's a stagger system. Oh, there's also minotaurs. Don't forget about the minotaurs. There's a stagger system and a balance system. So you can knock enemies off balance and then push them over and then crawl on them and continue to do damage. But that balance and the way they fall is all dynamic. So if you push them off like a bridge, they'll just fall, and that's it. That's the end of their story. There's a clip that, if I can remember, I'll put it in for the video version of the show. But I was fighting this ogre or cyclops, and I climbed up on its head. If you've ever played Shadow of the Colossus, it's a lot like that, but on a smaller scale. You know, you're not fighting colossi, but, you know, they're like 50, 40 feet tall. So I climb up on this ogre's head, and I with my big giant sword, I drive the sword into his head, and like if you hold down Y, you do the heavy attack, but if you continue to hold it down, you do it even longer. So I drive the sword into his head, and then I yank it out as he's falling, and it kills him. But it was like the most epic thing I've done in the game in a very long time, and it was all dynamic. Like I had to climb up on the guy's back, I had to get in the right position so that the heavy attack would trigger. And I had to hold it and risk the extra time, you know, hanging on to this guy to do the maximum amount of damage and take him out. And I've done that maneuver multiple times because if you have a big giant sword, you're going to use it. And it never gets old. Like, this game makes you feel so cool when you do your abilities and you figure things out. And it's really, really impressive. And it's why I keep coming back to it, that and the dynamic world. Different pawns can do different things. So if you've got like an archer in your class, or in your party rather, you know, he'll start firing before you even get to the fight with your sword, and he can take a couple guys out. If you're a Lord of the Rings fan, I highly recommend you play this game, because you can definitely convince yourself that it's a Lord of the Rings game. With, you know, you've got your Legolas, you have your archer, you can make your guy just look like Gandalf, so you can have a Gandalf kind of wizard, you can have your Aragorn. It's enough of the fantasy of Lord of the Rings for me that I can sell it. You can imbue your weapons with elemental abilities. So there was a moment, another little anecdote, where I was climbing like this hill, and I was leading the party, so some of my party members had fallen behind, and one of them got caught in slime, like sentient slime, and they were being like devoured. So I turn around and I pull my sword out, and you can give pawn commands to like tell your pawns to attack or to heal you or to stay behind or whatever. So I tell them to attack, and my mage in my party charges up my sword with lightning, and I run down this hill, and I leap off the hill, and I come down on the slime and hit it with my electric sword. And it was like, it was so cool. And the moment came out of nowhere. It wasn't part of a main quest. It wasn't scripted. This moment was completely dynamic, and, you know, I felt like the coolest kid on planet Earth doing this cool jump. And I think that's really what makes this game so special, is that these awesome moments, these epic moments that you want to clip and send to all your friends, they can happen at any time. And it's really like, it's really impressive, and it's something that I haven't really experienced since I would compare it to a Baldur's Gate, but obviously the combat in Baldur's Gate is a lot different. It's not as in the moment, real time, because it is turn-based. But that sense of you do something and it works and you feel really cool and you know, you pat yourself on the back for it, definitely comes up a lot in this game. I already mentioned the crawling on enemies. It's awesome, and I recommend if you do buy the game, you do it as often as you can, because you can hit different weak points and you can knock weapons out of people's hands, or you can do different attacks depending on where you are on the monster's body. Really, really neat stuff. Again, if you played Shadow of the Colossus, it's a little bit like that in terms of the feeling of climbing around. I think the soundtrack to the game is pretty good too. It's nothing like crazy, right? It's your standard fantasy epic music. But I think it really helps to punctuate those big moments, especially if they're happening outside of a main quest and you just do something cool and the music is going way harder than it needs to just to, really back up that moment. I think it does a great job there. Now, I do have some negatives for the game. No game is perfect. And I think this game in particular, I think, has some issues that might immediately turn some people off, despite the fact that I'm raving about it. The performance of the game, the technical performance, not great. I'm playing on an Xbox Series X, so I've seen some folks on PC with like ridiculous rigs that are getting much more impressive performance. But if you're a console gamer, you're going to experience some chugging. Frame rates drop left and right, especially in large areas like a city or during hectic moments of combat. You're very rarely going to be at a steady 60 FPS. There also aren't a whole lot of visual settings in the game on console side. You can't turn off motion blur. You can't adjust there really aren't many things you can adjust. There's no performance versus resolution settings, which is always annoying for me because I'm a big stickler for frame rate. I dunk on Pokemon a lot, Scarlet and Violet, because of how terrible that game runs. But for me, like I could understand why people played so much Pokemon because despite the technical issues of this game, I'm still playing a ton of it, right? I'm able to look past the frame rate drops and the chugging that the game encounters just because I'm having so much fun. So, for those Pokemon fans out there that I bashed your game, I do apologize. I see the appeal now. It's just for me, frame rate's such a big thing that I notice so like immediately. But to this game's credit, it's so much fun that I'm able to look past it. So, in terms of story, the plot is really not present. There is a story, but I am not really paying attention to it because it's mostly delivered through large exposition dumps. As so far that I can tell, you are the Arisen. That's like your character's title. There's a cool cutscene in the beginning of the game. This isn't really a spoiler. It's in like the first like hour where you're fighting this like giant dragon and the dragon like completely, he basically kills you and then he rips your heart out and eats it. But that makes you the Arisen. So that allows you to enter this like spirit realm and summon pawns. And that's about as much of the story as I have grasped so far. Like I said, I'm not a big story guy. I have definitely missed a lot of things. And that's a complaint. That's a me problem for sure. I have a difficult time following the stories of most games because I don't really pay attention. I'm mostly in it for gameplay. Unless it's something I deliberately lock in and pay attention to the story for and turn off other distractions. But for this game, I wasn't really taking the story super seriously because I was having so much fun with the gameplay. But if you are someone that wants a narrative-focused, a narrative-forward game, especially when it comes to these fantasy RPGs, I wouldn't necessarily say that's where this game shines. This game shines in your combat and in just existing in this world. Another thing that I didn't know going in is that everybody talks like they're in a Shakespearean play. I guess they were trying to go for like a period piece thing with the dialogue. It's really weird and off-putting at first, especially if you're not used to people talking that way because, we're in 2024 and, I certainly don't talk like I'm in Othello, but everyone in this game does. And it does take some getting used to, but once you get used to it, it's not that bad. I only have it down as a negative because for me it was so jarring at first that I had to do extra mental gymnastics to figure out what people were saying to me. But yeah, everybody kind of talks with that, like, I don't know if it's Shakespearean or medieval. If you've ever gone to the Ren Fair and like people do that fake English accent and they use like they say ye and things like that, it's like that. And it's a little weird, but again, you get used to it relatively quickly. The save system is not great. I don't think anything will ever top Baldur's Gate save system, where it's like 2 buttons to quick save. In this one, you can quick save, but it's not super accurate. It's not, I quick save right before I do this fight. I go into the fight, I die, I get a party wipe, I can immediately reload to that point. It's a little bit looser with where that save point's actually going to restore you. I've lost a lot of progress because I neglected to save regularly. And when you die, which by the way, you can die like really easily. Water, at least at this point in the game, if you fall in water, like you just instantly die. The water is like evil. I don't know if I missed something, but if you or your pawns go in the water, all these like tentacles come out and kill you. Your pawns instantly die from that. You will take a hit of your health, but then get spawned back on shore. But if you fall in and that chunk of health they take kills you, then you are dead. Not really sure what the deal is with that. You do have a main pawn that you pick at the beginning of the game, and that pawn can always be revived there's like spirit stones. You can always revive that pawn. So you're not getting complete party wipes. But I have had it where I'm journeying from one city to the next on foot, and all my pawns fall off a cliff into the river and die, and I'm alone until I get to town and can revive my other pawn. And that ties back in with the save system, because when you die, you can either load your last save or you can load your last inn rest when you rest at an inn. And it doesn't tell you the time on that. It doesn't tell you how long it's been since you've done either of those things. So there was a moment in the beginning of the game where I hit the load the last inn rest because I was like, I don't know when either was, when I saved or when I last rested. Yeah, I ended up losing like an hour and a half of gameplay. So my recommendation is, if you're playing, save often and note, you don't have to literally note it, but just kind of mentally note when you rest at these inns. And it's tough at first because the inns are expensive to rest at. You get money pretty quickly. But in the beginning of the game, you're not always able to rest at an inn because it's like 2,000 gold, which you don't have that kind of money in the beginning of the game. I think it would be a pretty easy fix if they just added times. Like if they said this was the time you last saved versus this was the time you last rested at an inn. Seems like a pretty easy fix. And if you listen to other reviews about this game, there is a PS3, an Xbox 360-ness about this game that is tough to describe. If you played the original Dragon's Dogma, which I played a little bit of it, this sequel, like 10 years later, feels like it could have came out relatively recently after the first game. Aspects of this game feel old, but like, I don't know if it's a bad thing. Honestly. I think they stuck to their guns on what they wanted to do. And, I admire that. But there are some quality of life things that you might expect from a modern RPG that are not necessarily in this game. I mentioned the saves. What else? Oh, there's only 2 races that you can choose from to create your character. The character creator is very detailed in terms of sculpting and proportions and dimensions of your character. But the 2 races are human or cat person, so you got to be okay with one of those. I went with a cat person just because I thought he looked cool. I made him like a lion man. But like, it's crazy to me that those are the 2 choices. It's like were there cat people on, like not literally cat people on the development team, but people that just liked cats and were like, we're sticking to this. We're putting cat people in this game. I don't know. It's very strange. But those are your choices. And maybe there's a lore reason. I think people like discriminate against the cat people. I've noticed some dialogue about that. Again, not really paying attention to that. That's my fault. But if you want to play as like an elf, there are elves in the game. I've met some, but you can't make your character one. So I don't know. That's a little weird. And that's one of those things that makes it feel a little bit dated. And then, yeah, the frame rate is also what makes it feel dated because, 30 FPS is bringing me back to 2012. But if you're a fantasy action fan and you've got a tolerance to learn the game's mechanics, which they do take some getting used to, and it does take a little bit to find your flow in this game, I think the payoff is very much worth it. It's always nice to feel cool in a game, and you can feel cool in this game pretty regularly. The game can also make you feel like a moron. If you try to do something cool and like completely fall on your face, like there have been multiple times where I've tried to crawl on an ogre or something, crawl up on it, and I leap off and I try to do this big attack, and I completely whiff and just faceplant and take a chunk of my health off because I just hit the ground. Just yesterday when I was playing, you can knock large enemies across destroyed bridges and use them as a bridge to get across, which was very cool the first time I discovered that. So I knock this ogre across this destroyed bridge, and I'm trying to get my party across so we can cross this river, and my pawns continue to attack the ogre, so the ogre falls and everybody dies because we fell in the river. So kind of a cool moment for a second there, and then the game's not the game's not perfect, and there is that little bit of jank to it, which I discovered the hard way. But yeah, let me know if you're playing Dragon's Dogma 2. Does it appeal to you? If you have played it, let me know what you think. But those are my thoughts on the game. I hope they were satisfactory. All right, really quickly, I wasn't sure I was going to include this, but it's something I'm having a lot of fun with. So we're going to talk about Marvel Snap again, everybody. I'm desperately waiting for that sponsorship. I'm sure the check is in the mail. But it's a new season of Marvel Snap, dropped just a couple days ago at the time of recording. The season actually snuck up on me. I didn't know what was happening. Usually I check and see how much time is left in the current season, but this one kind of just came out of nowhere. It's Thunderbolts themed if you're a Marvel fan. I think that Thunderbolts movie is coming out eventually. I don't know. But the season pass card is Baron Zemo, who if you watch the Winter Soldier show, Falcon Winter Soldier, he's in that. It's like not the same guy, but same name, I guess. You can also get Red Hulk now. And I'm only mentioning this because Red Hulk was one of my favorite characters when I got into comics. That Greg Pak Incredible Hulk run got me into comics. And 13-year-old Sam thought Red Hulk was cool because he had a gun. I stand by that, by the way. It was cool. And he's like Green Hulk, but he's red. So pretty neat. Anyway, Red Hulk, he's a counter for one of the more popular decks in the game, the High Evo Hulk deck. If you play Marvel Snap, you know what I'm talking about. But it's refreshing to kind of get that. I know Second Dinner, when they talk about developing for this game and releasing new cards, they always talk about release valves, right? If there's a mechanic in the game that some players find frustrating or that's becoming too dominant, they like to put a release valve in the game to kind of offer a little bit of a counter for that, maybe that annoying mechanic. And that's what Red Hulk is here. So I'm really looking forward to this season. I'm back in. I've been playing a lot more. I took a little bit of a break a couple seasons ago, but I'm playing at least once a day now, and I'm having a lot of fun. I think Zemo's ability, he allows you to recruit cards from the enemy deck, so you can steal cards from them and play them. I think it's kind of a new archetype that's a lot of fun. And like I said, again, the game is free. If you have any interest in Marvel or card games or anything, considering it's a free mobile game, it is very lightly monetized. Now, there is a shop with lots of egregious bundles you can buy, but you're not getting a pop-up ad. You're not getting banner ads. I think it's very tame when it comes to a mobile game. But it's one of my favorite games, and I'm going to keep bringing it up on the show whenever I feel like it. But yeah, let me know if you're playing Marvel Snap, if I've convinced any of you to come over and play the game. It's a ton of fun, and I think it's got ever more potential that it continues to realize. But anyway, that's going to wrap things up for episode 6 of No Credits Rolled. Thanks so much for watching. I just want to remind everyone you can email questions or comments to nocreditsrolled@gmail.com. That's nocreditsrolled@gmail.com. Like I said at the top of the show, we've got a call-in line. You can call in and leave us a voicemail at 856-209-0713. That's 856-209-0713, and we just might play it on the air. Make sure to subscribe to No Credits Rolled on Spotify, Apple, and wherever you get your podcast. And if you're feeling generous, make sure you check out the Patreon. Every little bit helps. That's going to wrap it up for episode 6 today. I'll see you next time on No Credits Rolled.
No credits rolled.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of No Credits Rolled. My name is Sam Whalen, and today I'll give my thoughts on Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, the Fallout TV show, and Fallout New Vegas. But first, I just want to do a quick announcement. We actually have a pretty cool thing with the show here. I'm happy to announce our very first partnership on No Credits Rolled, and that's with the wonderful folks over at Philly Drinkers. Of course, this is a podcast produced locally in the Philadelphia area, so we're happy to partner with Philly Drinkers. They have all the Philly sports apparel you could ever need at affordable prices. They've got some really cool stuff if you're a Philly sports fan. So use the link in the description wherever you're getting this podcast, and every purchase you make at Philly Drinkers helps out the show. So go check out Philly Drinkers. Thanks to them for partnering with the show. Now let's get on to the news. So this first story here comes from IGN. There's a lot of hubbub about Fallout in general now, and like I said, I will cover my thoughts on the Fallout show and Fallout New Vegas in the review portion of the show. But this first story regards Fallout 4, actually. With the massive success of the Fallout TV show on Amazon Prime, there's a next-gen update coming out for Fallout 4 that's hitting consoles and PC. I believe by the time this airs, it will already have come out. But you're talking 60 frames. That's the biggest thing I've seen. I think there's some other minor details, maybe some bug fixes. And while that sounds like a positive, and it is a positive, there was a long-anticipated fan-made expansion called Fallout London. And this fan-made expansion took a massive hit from this next-gen update. From Michael Kripe at IGN, Team Fallon's Dean Carter, project lead on the highly anticipated mod Fallout London, has opened up about how Bethesda's upcoming Fallout 4 update impacted the studio, saying the team felt, quote, blindsided by the move. He says the team had no communication from Bethesda when it came to the update's release plans, resulting in the unforeseen delay of Fallout London. While the team pivots to account for a relatively substantial new update for Fallout 4, Fallon is left wishing it had a heads up. So I did some looking into this update for this story, and there's a trailer that dropped way back in 2022 where they show off kind of the map and some of the NPCs they've added. And just from, it's like a 4.5 minute long trailer, it looks incredible. Like it's London, right? Like they really did it. There's a subway, there's the underground, there's the Thames, there's those kind of London-y, that's probably not the right word. You know what buildings in London look like. It made me think of Assassin's Creed Syndicate, which is my only touchstone for what London looks like, kind of. And so it looked very impressive, and it was obviously on a very large scale for this mod. And with that trailer coming out in 2022, they've been working on this update for years, and they kind of got screwed over by this next-gen update that came out of nowhere. I think overall, we kind of have a failure to communicate here. The messed up part is the mod, the Fallout London mod, was supposed to drop on the 23rd of April, and of course, the next-gen mod dropped on the 25th of April. So this team was kind of left, like they said, blindsided and kind of scrambling, trying to pick up the pieces. This is a pretty big-scale operation for them, and they were having to move a lot of things around. So, I see both sides of the argument, Bethesda versus the Fallon team. And I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. It's F-O-L-O-N, so Fallon, I don't know. But for the Fallout team, the Fallout London mod is a massive investment for them. They have to time their teases for the mod, the PR for it, the trailers. I mean, it was essentially being framed as if it was an expansion for Fallout 4. But as far as I know, it would have came out for free. I should have looked into that more. But if it's a mod, it's going through the mod system anyway. But the presentation of it was very AAA. It was very high class. So these people are taking this very seriously. It's not, you're not getting Macho Man Randy Savage as your dragons in Skyrim. This is almost its own DLC in its own, in its own regard. Now, for Bethesda to drop this update out of nowhere, it completely derailed the team's plans. And I can't even begin to imagine how frustrating this would have been, because honestly, hearing the news about the next-gen update as just a fan of Fallout, the news kind of came out of nowhere. I don't know if they had this planned or if they were kind of waiting to see if how the show did critically and word of mouth kind of thing. And because the show has piqued such interest in Fallout, if that was why they did this update. I mean, Fallout 4 came out years ago, and they're just pumping out this next-gen update now. I think it's probably because of they might have, the success of the show really made a statement, and they were like, well, let's capitalize on this. Unfortunately, that leaves this mod team kind of out in the cold. But as far as I know, there was no formal collaboration between Bethesda and this Fall On team. So Bethesda really had no obligation to let them know, technically, right? I mean, that's like the devil's advocate argument, which I hate doing, but when you're Bethesda, right? Bethesda and fan-made mods go hand in hand. I mean, there was a story a while ago where they talked about how they kind of count on the modding community to fix their games once they come out. So you can't be Fallout or you can't be Bethesda and love your modding community and advocate for that, and then completely blindside one of your biggest modders with an update that derails a project they've been working on for years. So it's a bad look, I think, for Bethesda. Do they care? Probably not. They're probably raking in the cash now with the success of the Fallout show. I'm sure sales have spiked for Fallout significantly, all of them. And you can get all those games for cheap, too. So even still, I mean, especially on PC where you can mod them, I'm sure Bethesda's raking in the cash from the success of the show. But, it's a bad look for Bethesda, really. And hopefully, this team over at the Fallout London team can sort of pick up the pieces, and hopefully it's not that much of a hampering on what they were doing. I don't really know. I'm not a game developer. I say that all the time. I don't know if it's equivalent to switching engines or what, but hopefully they can sort of get back on track and maybe see something this year or even next year, depending on how long the delay is. But yeah, let me know what you think. Are you part of the Fallout modding community? Do you think this is a overstep from Bethesda? Do you think it's a slight? Or do you think they didn't even really consider it, I don't know. It's tough to say, but either way, shout out to the Fallout London team. Hopefully they can get something released sometime soon. So our second story here is from GamesIndustry.biz. Meta's first quarter earnings are in, and the tech company continues to dump money into VR/AR without much of a return. Reports show they have lost around $3.8 billion on the venture. But don't worry, folks. Despite that, Meta's profits are still up across the board. This is from Brendan Sinclair at GamesIndustry.biz. Quote, the revenue for Meta, this is just some numbers here that I'm going to try to interpret. I'm not an economist, but the revenue of $36.5 billion, that's up 27% year on year. The net income is $12.4 billion. That's up 117% year on year. Sounds good for revenue. I don't know. Again, I don't know how budgets work, but and then this is Reality Labs. This is the VR branch of Meta. Their revenue was up $440 million, which is up 30%. But the operating loss is $3.85 billion, which is compared to a loss of $3.99 billion last year. So the amount they're losing on this tech has gone down. Their profits are still up, but this is a quote from Brendan Sinclair as well. He says, despite losing money at a rate of more than $1 billion per month since June of 2022, Meta affirmed its commitment to Reality Labs, saying, quote, we continue to expect operating losses to increase meaningfully year over year due to our ongoing product development efforts and our investments to further scale our ecosystem. So that's our weekly dose of corporate gibberish for you here on No Credits Rolled. But essentially, they don't care that they're losing money because their profits are still up, and it looks like they're committing to this, right? They're committing to the bit of VR and AR. I don't know why. I can't really figure it out. The scale at which these big tech companies operate astounds me. They can just burn money, $1 billion per month on this. But when you compare it to their profits, it's not that much, right? If you're up, what was the net revenue here? Net income was $12.4 billion. So if you're losing $1 billion a month, I mean, at that point, it's just, is money even real? And if you're committed to this, if you think that this is the future, if you're trying to set the trends, yeah, they're going to keep dumping money into it until everybody accepts it, right? I mean, remember when the iPhone first came out, everybody was like, oh, an iPod and a phone together, how's that going to work? Nobody really bought it. You see this a lot of, time and time again with new tech. And, maybe I'm just a naysayer, but I really don't see VR going that way. If anything, AR is going to be the way it goes, right? Where you have the Tony Stark glasses that look like sunglasses and you put them on and, you get your tech information that way on your screens right there in your eyes, kind of like an Apple Watch, but for your head. Speaking of that,